And it's recording. Well, hello everyone, and hope you've been very well. And look, we have Steve and Evan Strong here with us, all the way from Queensland, I believe North Queensland. And these guys are just amazing. They're just incredible. They've written many books. They've been on the Aboriginal sacred knowledge and the hidden knowledge, which is not known in the West. They've written Between a Rock and a Hard Place, and they've written Forgotten Origin, Mary Magdalene's Dreaming, Constructing a World Map, and several other books. They're very excellent researchers, and we're happy to have them today to talk about many developments and also possibly the strange Stonehenges in New South Wales. There was a massive Stonehenge, and it seems to have been obliterated by the government. And we're going to find out all about that. And I even see a YouTube video from 2018, Stephen Evans Strong petition, Save Australia's Stonehenge. So hopefully they can tell us a bit about that as well. So Stephen, Evan, welcome. And how have you guys been?
Good. Happy to be here today.
Yes, we're more than happy to speak to you again, mate. And we are still here, and we're allowed to sit in our house. And actually right now, I'm not sure we're doing the 1.5 metres distancing. Oh, God. Then again, we are family.
Yeah, true.
Yeah, so we should be all right. Although in Victoria, this could be a problem now. That may be illegal. So for those in Victoria that are watching us, and I believe you're one of them at the moment, the fact that we're sitting there, we're actually diagonally sitting, aren't we?
We're diagonally sitting.
So it's still nearly socially distancing, so we shouldn't be breaking any laws today, but we don't know about tomorrow. So we're fine.
Yeah, well, here in Victoria, we were going good, and then the protests started up, and then now we're not going so good anymore. So they might have to lock down everything again, I guess. But yeah, that's the way. It's a bit embarrassing, I guess, for our government, but what can we do?
Well, it's funny. I heard that one stage Daniel Andrews said the reason there's been a spike is because of the protesting marches. And I thought to myself, well, that's interesting, because they marched in Sydney and Brisbane and Adelaide, and they did exactly the same thing as they did in Melbourne. But apparently in Melbourne, when you protest, the virus mustn't know, and then attacks only in Melbourne, but it didn't do in the other states. So can I suggest to Daniel Andrews, using that idea that the protest march caused that, would only work if there was the same spike in the other states where there was a protest. So maybe he needs to make up a new excuse.
That's very interesting. Wow. Yeah. I was wondering, maybe it might be like the sunlight. We have we don't have as much sun as you guys, so maybe the sun can't disinfect and kill the virus or something like that. But anyway,
maybe. I mean, it's interesting how there's been some major outbreaks, not just in Victoria, but around the world, in meatworks. In Germany, I think something like 700 or 800 people have caught it at one meatworks there. It may be just a freak thing that turns up, because I think there was an earlier outbreak in a meatwork in Victoria.
There was, yeah.
Do you know what I think? I think because it's such a mutated this virus that's been made in a laboratory, I don't believe that anyone can really predict how it works, because when you look at it in Australia and our percentage to the percentage of people who've died in America, they are 120,000% higher. And even when you factor population in, their death rate is 1,000% higher than ours. So if you tried to explain to someone why it is that the death rate in America is 1,000% higher than Australia or New Zealand, I don't reckon you're going to get any scientist to explain it away. So I think we're dealing with something that's very manipulated, and I think that it's used for a purpose, which is to create a new society that we shouldn't be part of.
Yeah, it doesn't seem to be behaving as we know a virus should, does it?
No. I mean, in America and other places, people who are younger are dying from it. But in Australia, they claimed one person was 33, died from it. When the autopsy came back 2 days later, it said, nah, no coronavirus here. So it's still above 60 rate, basically. There might be one person under 65 in the whole of Australia who's died from it. But in other countries, it's different, completely different. So, you know, I really think that when you're dealing with something that wasn't made by nature, and you're using paradigms of all other viruses and germs that weren't made by nature and trying to work out an answer to something that this time came out of a laboratory, I think you're going to have some problems. And I think the reason it behaves differently is because maybe they're remutating it in different places. Who knows? Because no one really knows what's going on. And I think that's the beauty of it. And that's the reason.
You're right about that. No one knows what's going on, and every expert has some kind of different opinion about it. Yeah.
Makes it very confusing, doesn't it?
Well, the only thing we know for sure is whatever the World Health Organization says, look elsewhere. I mean, we know that much, so we know where not to look. In fact, I think they were the last organization in the world to declare this a pandemic. So the one place I wouldn't go to is them. Anyway, that's another game.
Yeah. So, I see you guys have been active for quite a while, doing interviews and writing books and on the internet. And one of the things that really was amazing about the conference, the live conference, which was last year that you did late last year in Melbourne, or early last year. I don't know. Last year seems so long ago, doesn't it? But
I'm not even sure myself. It could have been early this year, but please don't ask for a month. That would be impossible.
Oh no! One of the things you were talking about was the Stonehenge in New South Wales. It seems something. I guess you could compare it to the Avebury serpent or to the Ohio serpent on top of a hill. Stones stretched out on top of a hill, astronomically aligned. The government seems to have torn it down a long time ago. And you also mentioned recently the stones that made it up have disappeared. What is going on with that? This could have been our biggest tourist attraction ever.
Well, that's even what the original researchers said in the 30s.
That's an interesting intro because we've got the handwritten letters by Frederick Slater, who was the president of the Australian Archaeological Society. And in one of the letters, he made that point. He made the point, in fact, they were even talking about, in the letter, of buses coming in, boiling up billies, what they would charge, and the fact that it would have been the greatest, because we're talking at a stage when all the stones were still there, right? All 184 that were standing there, and then there are 10 acres of stone arrangements, and some of those stone arrangements contain hundreds of rocks again, and some weigh tons. Now, they looked at all that when it was all there before it was all destroyed, and this was in the 1938, I think, and Slater said exactly that. And he actually called it Australia's Stonehenge, which, by the way, is a slight insult because it's far more than that, much more than the Stonehenge in England. I'm not rubbishing the one in England, but this is far more important. So, yeah, that was written about in some detail. And in fact, I know that Frederick Slater, when he despaired of the Australian government, approached the Carnegie Institute, because we know there's letters written about that. And that was part of the proposal they put towards them in regard to getting funding to save the site. But fortunately for the Australian government, just before anything happened, we had the Second World War.
Yep.
And during the Second World War, the government, as you know, as they have right now, they have martial powers. This is a medical martial emergency, but that was a military one. And actually, I'll just slightly correct what you said there. I got to make the point that the owners of this site worked with Slater and Fordham, the principal that was working on site, closed off the area lest the cattle walk on the rocks, and brought them in, sat with them, and it was really obvious. I've read notes with the farmer there. He actually went fishing with original people who came and did ceremonies. So we need to understand that, yeah, that actually it wasn't the government that destroyed it. But I can tell you, because we've got the letters that say, number one, letters were written to the farm owner about this, and number two, he was visited in 1940 by the government about this troublesome story. And very, very soon after, the son who I spoke to before he passed on, was told by his father to go out and destroy it. Now, that was after the government, and Slater said he was going to write to the government and demand they leave him alone because he was threatening him. And we did some other research, and we found in 1938, that farm was owned by the CBC Bank in Sydney, big mortgage. In 1940, during the war, the farmer paid the mortgage off and he owned it completely. You would wonder, why is it? The stones were destroyed in 1940. The farmer was threatened in 1940, and once they were destroyed, his mortgage was paid off. He must have made money during the war being a farmer, which a lot of farmers did, because during the war, they sold their food for nothing. They couldn't have made any money. A lot of farmers went broke during the war, but he paid his mortgage off. So theoretically, we could say, and a lot of people blame the farmer for destroying the site. But if you go behind the scenes, you'll find out the farmer was behind them all the way through until someone came to visit him. Now, my understanding was the option was this: you destroy the stones, or we'll take the farm because you don't own it. We'll close the mortgage on it. So what would you do if you were the farmer? He had no choice. He had to destroy the site. And then after that, the mortgage was clear. But I can tell you that I spoke to the present day farmer who took the tractor out to do it. And every time he spoke about that, he wept. He felt so bad about what he did. And he told me, it was quite interesting, because after they'd knocked all the stones off the site and pushed them into the ground and took the larger stones down to the dairy, and we have a 1955 account, don't we, Evan? By the Richmond River Historical Society. They went there in 1955 and photographed the stones there. So
yeah, some black and white, even some black and white photos.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then gave them rows and then described them, and we've got that report. So the people who say we're making it up, it's rubbish. It was there. But what's interesting was, after he did that, he was told by his father to go and destroy the mound. Now, this guy's a strict Catholic. He went to church every Sunday for the whole of his life. So he goes up to the top of the mound, and he told me this, and he put the blade down to destroy the mound. Then he lifted the blade up and went back to his father and said, "Dad, if I put the blade into the ground there, I'll die." Now remember, he doesn't believe in this sort of stuff, but he said, "Dad, I just got this feeling if I cut into that ground, I'm going to die." Now they've never done ceremony, and he told me that. Now his father couldn't drive the tractor because this guy and his brother became the only people in the area that had an earth moving business. So they did all that sort of stuff. And because he refused to destroy the mound, it was still there. So, yeah, there's two parts to that mound, but it was 184 sandstone column rocks, basalt, and some would have weighed about 10 ton, wouldn't they, Evan?
Yeah.
And some would have been a far less. But remember, it's on a steep slope of 45 degrees. So the question is, how did they get the rocks from the bottom to the top of that slope and stand them upright when they weigh 10 ton? Now, you could put 50 people down the bottom with a 10-ton rock, and you know what would happen? It'd still be down there. So that's one of the biggest questions about this site. And there was a second mound of 3,500 cubic meters. And all of that stuff there, according to geologists who've looked at it, and I've read the report, all of that material is foreign to that area. So I got a different question. How do you move 3,500 cubic mils? What, wheelbarrow?
Yeah, wheelbarrow, crowbar, a couple of little...
And a couple of blokes pushing the wheelbarrow, and there it is. Oh, hang on, there was no wheel in Australia until Cook. No, can't be a wheelbarrow. They must have picked it up in their hands and dumped it in there. So yeah, this is an interesting mound. From a technological viewpoint, it is a construction that defies the story of original people in Australia, because they couldn't have had this. And then when you look at the rocks there...
The rocks don't come from that area.
No, they do
the
not.
nearest the nearest deposit of that style of rock, I think, was at Broken Head.
22 k's away.
Yeah.
And the rocks have not been percussion broken because there's sharp lines in there you could cut your hands on, aren't there?
Mm-hmm.
They were not percussion broken because there's no percussion bulb on there, which means it wasn't rock on rock. To shape these rocks, which are perfectly straight and really severe angles, you've got to use metal blades or more. And again, that's not supposed to be in Australia. So you wonder why the Australian government will want to destroy that site, and I think I've given your listeners a bit of a reason why.
And then wasn't that long ago, was it 2 years ago, they found some of those rocks that had been moved from that site to a different site.
Oh, yeah.
And a guy was doing a subdivision, and then some of the people that were interested in buying one of the blocks saw those rocks just sitting there and notified us, and then we had a look, and yeah, it was some of those.
We found out from a solicitor there who won't give his name up, and we know this because it was a solicitor who was working for the ladies who were buying the place. We found out from him that everyone knows those rocks were taken from that mound and dumped there. It was a quarry. It was dumped at the entrance to a quarry, and it was covered. It was covered for 70 years. There was dirt over the top, and when they did the subdivision, they were re-exposed. And we've got pictures of me standing next to them. Before I was informed by a solicitor, if I went back onto that site again, what would happen to me, Evan?
Jail.
I go to jail.
Wow.
It was a public site for sale, right?
Like
a subdivision. A subdivision. Yeah. Everyone could drive in and look at, but if I went in there to look at it, I would actually, and I was told by a solicitor that was the case, I would go to jail for looking for a public land that's for sale.
So, and I'm thinking most of those probably got sold to landscapers.
They did.
And they're unbeknownst, people would have gone to a landscaper and bought these rocks, and they'd be in their garden now.
Well, these rocks that come from that mound were dumped in creeks. They were dumped because there were thousands of them. It wasn't just 184 on the mound. It was the thousands and thousands of rocks that made up over 100 different formations of animals that you had to do ceremony on before you could get to this mound. You just didn't come to the mound, so I'm going to do a dance on the top. There were stories of elders coming from Kimberley region, from Fraser Island, Cape York, and spending 4 years in ceremony at this mound.
Like after it was destroyed, a few would actually walk on there going, what's happened? What's going on?
Yeah, we read a story of some mob from Fraser Island that came down and said, where's the mound? And Slater, the guy that owned the farm, not Slater, had to explain that he destroyed it, and he went fishing with them, and they told him how important it was and how nothing should have been touched. And we've got these reports and historical accounts. So the people who claim we're making all this up, no, we've got handwritten notes by people who went on site and saw it. I spoke to the person who destroyed the site, for God's sake, 6 times.
And then we met someone that must have been 5 or 6 that was there, witnessing the discussion between his father and the landowner.
About what am I going to do?
I don't want to do this, but I have to do it.
Yeah,
kind of.
It was actually, from what we're told, the 5-year-old was telling us at the time that this farm owner, that everyone's attacked. Right, they've attacked him for this. He was distraught because he said, I'm trying to talk to the original people about it, what to do. And of course, they're not allowed to talk to him about it because it's sacred sites. So by law, they couldn't speak to him about what to do. So he was in a bind because he said, they're coming. This 5-year-old, we spoke to him at a conference, didn't he? He said he was really upset. They spoke for an hour and a half what to do, and he didn't want to harm it.
So I mean, it's quite ridiculous when you've got these people going around going, oh, it's we've made it up, it's nothing, when you've got the notes of the Historical Society from the 30s, the 40s, the 50s.
Photographs of it.
You've got eyewitnesses.
I spoke to the guy that destroyed it, and they're saying it's made up, and it was reported. We have reports of it in every newspaper in Australia. And in fact, it became internationally known, this site, and then it was destroyed and the whole thing was covered up. But a lot of people, including all the archaeologists, said it's nothing, it doesn't exist, and we've made the whole thing up. And I'm not going to use the word conspiracy because you know what that means when you use that word, you're in deep shit. So we're going to call it academic universal ignorance, aren't we? Bless them.
You can make a nice acronym out of that.
That's a good term to describe it, actually.
Yeah.
You're saying
Because there's no planning as such. Although I can tell you, ladies and gentlemen, they did send a group of archaeologists onto the site to examine it. The fact that they were marine archaeologists has got nothing to do with it, but they did send them on there and they said they couldn't see a thing. Mind you, that was after the site was destroyed. And they were there for half an hour and they said I couldn't see anything. If you're there for more than half an hour, you'll find hundreds of rocks that have got all sorts of shapes that are sandstone in a colder basin, and you'd know straight away. But then again, if you're a marine biologist, archaeologist, you wouldn't look for that sort of shit, would you?
And you've got different types of sandstone, some that
yes.
don't belong from that area as well. That are different.
We have coarse and fine grain sandstone. Now, the coarse stuff is found further upstream and the fine grain loam stream. So they're different types of sandstone. Well, they didn't even notify there was sandstone there. So, but then again, they're marine biologists. They do a lovely job with coral, wouldn't they? Or a shipwreck. If they had a shipwreck, they would have been into it straight away.
That brings us back to the fact that there was
that's right.
A ship that was found there.
Yeah, even Jack, even I shouldn't have said that. Even the farmer told us, and we've read reports about the fact that they found a stone anchor, which is 3,000 years old, and they had it, and we know the name of the person it was given to, and an Egyptian boat. And even the farmer said, yeah, we saw it, and many people have spoken of it, and then it was taken away. And you know, it's funny, the anchor was found and was given to the Byron Bay Shire Council, and it's a 3-ton anchor was given to them, and they admit they received it, but they've lost it.
Yes, it's disappeared.
That's right, it's lost, isn't it? Yeah, can't find it anymore. But now, when you get something that weighs tons and it's an ancient 3,000 to 4,000 year old anchor found in Byron Bay, when you get that, you probably just put that out the back and forget it's there, wouldn't you?
Mm-hmm.
Wouldn't be something you'd sort of focus on. Be more important that you found.
Because we've had people actually looking for that.
Yes, yeah, and the council have admitted they received it.
Mm.
So we're not making. Oh, mind the archaeologists claim that's a load of crap too. But the council said, yeah, we received it. We know the name of the person it was given to. We've read about this boat. So yeah, the Egyptian boats were there, but they lost them too. It's tricky around this place. In archaeology, everything gets lost.
So how big was this stone anchor? That's really interesting.
According to Fred Fordham, who was only the principal of the Brunswick Heads Primary School, so just a normal hippie in the 1930s, it was what you normally had. The stone anchors were like a big round rock with a hole through the center, and what they do is they use it. It's the only way you drop it slightly, because when you're going through sea in waves, when you come near the shore there, the boat gets turned over. That's what they used to use. And then they got better around 3,000 years ago. My understanding was it has to be probably 50 to 100 kilos. And it took people to pick up and move around, and it was perfectly centered in there. And it was found on right next to the mound, wasn't it?
Yes.
No, he said 50 meters past the mound, because we met a person who sat with this guy once, and he said, oh, it's that way, just past the mound. We remember he was pointing. He said, what at the mound? He said, no, just past there.
And keeping in mind, up until, when was it? Up until relatively recent times, that whole area was still flooded with water.
Yeah, that was interesting, because what happened was, Fordham was the person who worked on there for 2 years, and Slater was the one that had the map. And he had all the language, the first language, and he had gotten that first language. I won't go through that process now. And he could read everything that was sending him. And he told Fordham, he said the mound, all the way up to the mound, was underwater. And Fordham told Slater and said, no, it wasn't. No, it's all, there's cattle here, and there's rocks here. No, it wasn't. He said, no, it was underwater. I know it was underwater. So Fordham went around and asked the old timers, and lo and behold, both of them said the same thing. Yeah, it was. It was all underwater, and then it was drained. So Fordham went back to the farm, and he found these ditches. It was flat, and he found all these ditches were dug there in different places. And what that did was drained all the water back into the river because it runs up against the river. And what he found was that Slater was telling them things about that site, like rocks that weren't there that were taken away because he had the original map, and the fact it was underwater. And no one, bar two guys in their 80s, could remember it, and the rest didn't. And they said they used to go for swims there. It was up to about their chest. So that boat that we were talking about was just down below there a bit more, would have been slightly deeper, and it must have been moored there and then just stayed there. And then it was picked up and moved. Now, this is all information we've got because we've got people in historical societies who go and research for us and find all this. They go and do all the head work there. So when people say this has been made up, well, they're just wrong because there's photographs. In fact, when the Historical Society went on, they went on to the farm twice to examine the stones, the big ones, the ones that weigh tons. And they described them in detail. They said one had crocodile eyes, inset eyes, and teeth that were engraved into it. And people told us they're natural, didn't they, Evan? Another one was made into the form of a human foot.
Yeah.
Yeah. And other ones were formed into fish form, and these were weighing tons and stuff like this. And there were 12 people's names who signed off that said they saw it there, including the person who started all the historical societies in the far north coast. So when people say we're lying, they have to include all those people who were there on site.
Yeah, and that goes back decades.
Yeah, yeah. And it was interesting because after they did that report, all of the rocks that were down at the dairy, what happened to them, Evan?
Disappeared.
They all disappeared because after they did the report, it got back in the papers again. And you know what the farmers are thinking? We destroyed the site, we got rid of most of the rocks, but we still got some here. It's evidence, isn't it? It's evidence, and they could take the site back. Because I've got to tell you, from the first time I met the 90-year-old, he was only worried about one thing. The blackfellas are going to take our land. That's what they were worried about all the time, weren't they, Evan? So what happened in around 55, all the big rocks got dumped. And that's what we found. And they took them to about 3 quarries. They chucked them in the river. They chucked them all around the town of Mullumbimby and got rid of all of the big ones because those big ones were still evidence, because when this team come of 12, they sent it off to Elkin. They sent it off to different papers. It got back in the papers again. So then that's when they dumped the rocks again. Now, the best part of this story is we know roughly where the rocks are and we know where they've been sold because people have kept an eye on that. But we're lucky. We actually have a map. They didn't have this at Stonehenge. They just put them back where they thought they should be. We have a map that was done to scale, and we never knew the scale, but we found it in another letter and we know the scale, with a drawing of each map and the name of each rock and the position it is in. And they never had that at Stonehenge. So we can actually put the rocks back in exactly the same position they were.
Plus, you can use technology like LiDAR and stuff like that, and it will still show the depressions of where the rocks were. So it's a jigsaw puzzle, but...
yeah, we've got that. Yeah. And we also have, before Carno passed on, because we had an elder that came from the centre that knew first language, and he took us on the site there. He knew first language, and he called the Hawks up. He did all those things and got permission off the elders there. He gave the song of the rocks and the song of the hand signs to a person that's still around here today. So that makes it different to even Stonehenge, because when they came back, they didn't have those songs anymore. Well, the good news is, in Australia, we know where to put the rocks, we know the name of the rocks, and we know the meaning of those names, and we also have the songs, which means, unlike anywhere else, we could put the whole thing back together and put it back in the state it was before Cook, because everything's still there. The names of the rocks are given, the songs are there, the positions down to a centimetre are marked on a map, which we have a copy of. So that's the good news. That's all the good news.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And it's
Yeah.
amazing that the culture still survived until modern times. Now, you mentioned also there are thousands of stones. It seems there were maybe cairns, like, as you say, formed into the shape of animals. One being a foot. That sounds like an Egyptian constellation. I think they had like a leg or a foot or something. Could this have been a zodiac?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Slater wrote time after time in his notes. The Egyptians came here to learn, not to teach. They didn't come here to learn how to build pyramids and stuff like that. That wasn't what they came here. They came here to learn. And he claims they learnt their hieroglyphs, their language, mysticism, and knowledge of the stars and knowledge of the past from the original people and came back. So you're going to find a lot of Egyptian mythology, iconography resembles strongly Australian inspiration because they came here and learnt that. We're of the same opinion. We've seen evidence all over this country of Egyptians being here. Telling us Egyptians were here, if you told us you found another Egyptian site, we'd say, oh, yeah, you're right. Well, we've only got about 30. Why do we want 31? I mean, it's that simple. We're past even worrying about that. The real issue is get over the fact that they were here, but understand why they came here. Really, that's the only important part of this now.
Yeah, because he talked about, he had a list of the people within ancient Egypt that came here.
Oh,
It was
yeah.
like the high priests, the princes, the royalty, the head scribes, all of the upper echelon ones. It was like a holy pilgrimage almost.
You know, we had a gentleman, Eric Bauer, who went through every state library in the country, going through microfiche, because all records of Slater are gone. They were all taken out. And you know what we have? We have about 50 newspaper clippings where I can tell you between 1910 to 1939, everyone in Australia knew Egyptians were there. Sir Grafton Elliott Smith, the first Australian academic to be knighted for a service to academia, wrote in 1910, the amount of Egyptian artifacts and iconography in Australia is so great, he is stunned by that. This was common knowledge. Oh no, look, Elkin talked about the fact he met a tribe in the middle of the Kimberleys and they could not communicate with one another until they broke into Mason hand signs. And the original people, he was a Mason, they just talked to each other with the Mason hand signs. And he just said, I can't believe it. These black fellas that are naked are talking to me in Masonic signs. The amount of Egyptian stuff there, if you look through the 20s and the 30s, it's written about by everyone. The Australian Anthropological Society had Slater in there lecturing for lectures about Egyptians there in the 1935s.
Was it last year? One of the coins up near Cairns from the Ptolemy period was that made the news again. It was found in the early 1900s.
Yeah, and they keep saying all the coins, Egyptian coins, were found by coin keepers who were wandering through the bush and dropped them. As you would, when you've got an ancient coin, thousands of years old, the first thing is you take it away from your display case and say, let's go for a walk in the bush and I'll put it in my pocket.
I might have a hole in my pocket.
Oh, it doesn't matter.
It's fallen and then a bunch of dirt's fallen on top of it.
And I can't find
it. Decades later when someone's putting in a fence post, they find it.
Yeah, they dig down 1/2 metre and there it is, and it's on a walking track and it's 1/2 metre down. They said, oh, they must have dropped it. This is common knowledge, but the important part is that what's important is the Egyptians went to the standing stone site, not to construct it. That wasn't the point. They went there to do the ceremonies. And this is what people don't understand. What they didn't come here to learn anything but the reason why we're here and the purpose of living. So they would come here and they would do the same ceremonies as the others. And that's why throughout that region and throughout the area, there are many pieces of Egyptian jewelry. I mean, I've got a piece of jewelry that was found at Carry-On, where the hieroglyphs are. It was looked at by the top laboratory in this country. And the guy that runs that's a friend of mine, and he did it for free. And yes, it was found next to an Egyptian bone, and we've got that. But the interesting part was, it was, I think, 73% aluminium, 3% copper, which, by the way, that type of combination of putting those two metals together, 3% copper, only takes place 4,000 to 5,000 years ago. It's not modern. Modern is 11 to 12%, so that tells us it's ancient. But here's the interesting part. Found between the walls of Carrion, we've got Egyptian glyphs. The other 24% cannot be identified by any laboratory in the world. That 24% of metal is not on the periodic table, and as the head scientist has told me more than once, and he's spoken to many times, he said, you've got 24% of that thing there. We don't know what it is because they tried to drill it with a metal drill and it bounced off it. They could not get through, sorry, an aluminium drill. They put an aluminium drill in because it was 73% aluminium and it bounced off. Couldn't make a mark on it. He said that 24% is not from here. So the Egyptian part of the story, and I'm saying that because you've got to remember that is more than likely an Egyptian piece of jewelry. We've got a very good chance it was found. It was worn by Nefertari. Now, the question is, what is an Egyptian doing in Australia? A. Number two, what is an Egyptian doing in Australia with something made of aluminium? Because there's no bauxite in Egypt, and they never melted aluminium. And more to the point, this thing that he's wearing, which is a clasp, and it's got a complete circle on it. Why is it that 24% of it is made of metal that's not from this planet? So when you put that together, the part about Egyptians being here is like, it's a 101 prelude to the main event is what was going on here. Oh, that's it. Is it in here?
I don't know.
I think it is. I'll show it to you. Yeah, it is. I'll hold it up. This is what I'm talking about. That's one side of it. And if you look at the top, and I'll turn it around this way, because one side's completely flat and the other side's got markings on it, you'll see part of a clasp. Now, Auntie Minnie Mace's daughter, I think it might have been granddaughter, was wearing it at a dance and it broke. It was a perfect clasp and it was circular there. So it's a piece of jewelry found between the walls there. And yes, we found a bone there, and I've taken it to Base Hospital. They've done a CAT scan and they said it's an ancient human bone. So we think it is Nefertari's. Oh, should put that back in there. Now, my point is that at the Standing Stone site and at this site here, yeah, we've got Egyptian stuff there. That's done and dusted. Why were they there? What were they come to Australia for? That's really the interesting part of this story. And it's interesting because the Standing Stone site makes it very clear that the narrative there, because we've had it translated by Slater, we know what was written in there, and Evan reads quite a few of them, don't you? And we'll find it's quite interesting because they're very religious in nature, and you might be able to find and read a couple for you now. But what's interesting is this. Many of the narratives start with man came to earth, came to earth, came to earth, came through the darkness. It is a constant theme that goes through the whole of this. And it's basically, in fact, I think, Evan, you've got a few of them now. So why don't you...
Enter and learn the truth of the divine light. The light of truth flows like a river of fire from God to the soul of man and women united. Guided by truth, man came to earth through darkness from the light of life that shines far off. The soul of man came from the immortal light to drink the water of life from God. Man came to earth as man with his senses, 7 of them, and was established in truth. God came in with the light of darkness and gave man a soul, and the sons of man brought in with the light became the pillars of heaven. He who brought life into the world set down men and women and gave them the sacred means of propagating life.
Now, can I just make a point? Evan's just reading a series of interpretations of those stones. Now, the one about finding the sacred means of propagating life, that sounds so much like genetic hybriding here. And really, that's what this is about. Now, these are the interpretations that Slater gave. Now, some people might think, well, how could Slater read something that is he claims it's at least 40,000 years old. He claims this is the oldest temple on the planet. How could he read that? What, did he channel it? Did he leave some sort of clues that he could pick up? Because he never went onto the site. So you need to understand something. We're making a big claim about what's written there, but it's based on the veracity of an academic that actually sat in a house in St Ives and never went to the farm, never went to the site. Now that sounds a little bit dodgy, doesn't it? And I always had an issue with that. And then Evan did some research and we found out the answer. was a lady called Eliza Dunlop. We knew about her, didn't we?
Yep.
She's really famous. She actually fought against Mile Creek, the first verdict. She wrote poems translating songs and poems from Aboriginal people, and actually won the trust of the tribal leader of the Wallamai area, because her husband was the first magistrate there in 1830. So 1830, think about it. This is when Aboriginal people still live in Otway, okay? And she was known, in fact, even in Wikipedia, she's known as the translator of Aboriginal people and stories. Well, what happened was that she actually won the trust of the tribal chief, and he gave her a complete compendium, and she sat down and wrote.
Murragawalda?
Murragawalda, yeah, it was called that. And it was a compendium of the first language, which is what the mound is written in and what the carry-on glyphs are written in, and gave it to her. And she wrote it down and completed it. Well then, she then passed it on to her daughter, who passed it on to her son. And her son's name is Goddard, and he is an academic. And if you do the research, and Evan has, and so did Eric, you'll find that the person who worked with Slater on site all the time was Goddard.
They had one paper together.
They had a paper which was cancelled, yes.
By the Department of
Tropical Medicine. Yeah, it was cancelled. It's condemned unfit by the Department of Tropical Medicine. So Slater did write papers too, but they destroyed them all, and this one was cancelled. But the interesting part was Goddard became the icon of archaeologists in Sydney Uni, and they wrote a paper together, and in that paper Goddard did a description of the site, and then Slater did the fact that this is Biami coming on a spaceship from overseas and comes to this planet and lands, and then his son goes back in a spaceship. Goddard didn't touch it. He gave the whole manual to Slater, because he knew if he did it, he wouldn't have his picture up in Sydney Uni today, and we'd know where his burial site was. Whereas Slater, we had to find his burial site, and there's nothing written about it because he got slammed by the government. So we know that he got the manual that was written by this person who was acknowledged by everyone is the person who could translate their work. So yes, when you saw that, what was written down, that is actually what was put on that mound. Now, what's really important with this, ladies and gentlemen, is this, that you look at all the stories by linguists about our first language, and it was grunting, it was basic, and it was about very, very physical, pragmatic concerns, not welcome to the pillars of heaven. This is not how we're supposed to have started. We're supposed to have started ignorant and got to the pinnacle we are today. But if you read that, the way they're speaking there, because every one of these things was about the soul, about the beginning of life and the purpose of living. And then you listen to the conversations we have today, and then people try and convince me we've gone upwards. I would suggest to you that what you're reading there was when we were at the peak. And now here we are wallowing in the trough. And we were of the opinion our brains have got smaller. You've been lied to. We've got evidence now. We're finding brains in Australia that are 1700 cc, and we found an archaic sapien whose brain is at least 300 cc bigger than ours. We've got dumber. And what this testimonial that Slater was looking at is what we were supposed to be doing, what we should be looking for. And what would happen is that when people were taken to this site, they would go after ceremony before they finally got onto that mound.
Yeah. We were told that what would happen is they'd pick a guy and a girl from each kind of generational group, and they'd prepare them. And then they might spend, depending where they are in Australia, they might spend even up to 2 years walking from the other side of Australia to this site. Then go through all those ceremonies. So they may end up being gone for 4, 5, 6, 7 years, but that's what they do. They send their best and brightest.
And the interesting part is, ladies and gentlemen, it's the one site where when they came from the Kimberley region, or if they came from Cape York, they would do their ceremony on that site. So every tribe has to understand, particularly the neighbouring tribes, it doesn't belong to a tribe. because all tribes were called there. We have evidence they all came there and had the right to come to that place and do ceremony.
And look, you've got Egyptian stuff there, so in actual fact, it
Egyptians were doing ceremony
in that sense.
And that means if the Egyptians were doing ceremony, it means that any tribe on this planet has the right. And there are many articles written in the newspapers, not just us, saying that the tribes from all over the country came to this particular place. So it's not like any other site.
Slater called it like a university or a college.
Yes, he called it the university, a university for the elite that came from. So elders would come from all over. And yeah, there are other stands arrangements in Australia, quite a few. Right, they're all over the place.
Some in Victoria.
Some in Victoria, they're quite strong. But there's like everywhere. There are many stone arrangements in England too, but there is Stonehenge. And why do we put Stonehenge in front of the others? Because it was the first one. It was the one, the central one, of which others had stories that came off that. And here, that one, which is in the most easterly point in Australia, set up very close to that, that was the central one. And then other stone arrangements would have stories that come off that relate to that. But this would have a focal story, and the others would have like chapters from within that particular tabernacle. So this place is more important than the others, simply because it's the foundation story of the dreaming, and it's the beginning of that story. And of course, our dreaming stories have in Guthrum Gully, which is the creation spirit that has his footsteps, and his second footstep is at this site. The first one is at where's the one on the coast there? What's that one on the coast?
Up here or down there?
No, just off the coast at Byron.
Gillian Rocks.
No, you know where Lewis and the others want to do their ceremony?
Yelgin?
Yelgin. Right, sorry. First step, Yelgin. Second step, where the site is there. So this is the beginning story. And of course, you've got to understand Bayami in all our dreaming is a sky hero. So when I say he comes and puts his footsteps, he came from up here, landed, and this is where he then introduced himself. And of course, where that second footstep is, that's where the mounds are. There's one that's male and one that's female.
Wow. This is some ancient astronaut Loki type Joker knowledge god.
I like that.
It's very close to the truth, yeah. And I've got to remember, there's the male mound, right, which is the bigger one. And then there's the female mound, which is very, very close, which is the smaller one. But if you'd ask me which one was more powerful, I'd probably say it's the female mound. And what can I tell you about the female mound? Nothing. I know a bit. I was given some information that comes from Auntie Millie Boyd, and I was given that information so I could know about the fact it was so friggin' important. But I'm not allowed to mention it, and I can't talk about it because it's women's business. But I can tell you that the female mound is no less, and we have a couple of male original people who think that's just a male site, don't we, Evan?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, well, they're just incredibly wrong there, I'm afraid.
What I'm getting, what it seems to be when you've got male-female sites, they're often very close to each other.
Yes, more close than what people realise.
People think they're kilometres apart. No, you know.
No. And I got to tell you, we know that the men's site's very important. And if I can I share with you? I think it's fairly important we try and give another dimension to this site, if you don't mind, which is the first time we went there. And we'll be mentioning, of course, I'll do a very quick ad for this, won't we? We will be mentioning this in our online conference we're putting up with Mary Robble, Barry Eaton and Leah, which is on when, Evan? July the...
in Australia, it's the 12th of July. If you're over in North America, it'd be about the 11th, I think.
Yeah.
But I've got all the time zones on the poster.
And I'm going to give up a story that I'm going to give on the day because I have to. So you're going to hear it twice. You're going to go. Yeah, I know you had to. He's got an appointment at a chiropractor. He's got to go. So I'll sort of finish him up a bit with this one. I want to tell everyone a story about this site that gives you the real importance of it. Okay, we've done other parts of it, but the most important part I haven't addressed. And I'll do that in more detail in our presentation, because we are going to be looking at rocks a fair bit this time, because every time we do a presentation, we don't repeat ourselves with what we did before. I'll do the prophecy and the rest will be different. And this part I am going to tell people. Now, when we got to this particular site, I got permission off the landholder to do 2 days archaeology. Right? I met with him and sat with him about 8 times. He trusted me. And he did tell me if there's any lands council there and he finds them when he comes down to check, we'll all be thrown off. And a couple of lands council to this day still hate me because I never took them on site. And I've tried to explain to them, you come, nothing happens. It makes no difference. Anyway, we had 22 people that came from all over the country, and they were very keen to go to this site, and I can understand why. It was an honour to be there. And everyone had their jobs, and we had 10 elders in a circle, and then I sort of turned around as we got there and I said, okay, I told the group there, because they'd flown from everywhere, I said, where you're going is a really important site. You've got to be very careful there. And I said, there's one thing they haven't told you. I said, there's no guarantee you're going on site. And you should have seen the looks I got from some people. And somebody said, but he's here. The guy that owns the place said it's okay. I said, yeah, but we haven't got permission from the spirits yet. And they're all looking at me like, what? I said, mate, we got to get permission off the spirits, and if we don't, we can't go. And I left with the elders, and you should have seen the looks of everyone there, because they weren't happy. They weren't told this before. I didn't want to tell them too early because they may not have come. So off we go. And anyway, the elders there are calling out to the old ones, and we're led by Kano. Now, as I said before, this guy is old way. I've seen him do stuff that aren't scientific. They're just pure magic. And he gets on the top of the mound, and we break up into 2 groups. A couple of us go on the small mound, and most go up on the big mound. And he's up on the big mound, and he breaks into first language song. So the other blackfellas there, nobody knows what he's doing. We don't know this language. And then he looks up and he calls, and then 2 hawks appear and circle directly above him. And we're all looking at each other, think, shit, that must be the sign. This must be the sign we're okay. And we look at him. He didn't say anything. We just looked at him, went like this. No, kept singing. And then those 2 hawks turn into 5. And they're circling around him in a circle, Of course, everyone looks across again, and we're thinking, well, shit, well, we could sit here all day. We could sit here for the rest of our lives, mate. We couldn't call up 5 hawks because they're not flock birds, as you know. They don't flock together, and they don't work like pigeons. They keep away from each other. And 5 together is wrong. Anyway, look at him. Not even looking at us. He's still singing. That's not it. It was only when the 8th bird appeared and it broke into a figure 8. Now, you've got to remember, this mound has 2 major circles joined with a line. They're really 2 circles joined up with a line that brings them together. And when it got into a figure 8, then he stopped singing and he turned and he said to me, you can go and get him now. Because up until then, we didn't have permission. He said, but follow the hawk. I wanted to know what that freaking meant, but lo and behold, in front of me, there's a hawk's shadow on the road, which is 1.5 k's away. But you ever try to walk after a hawk shadow? I had to run after it. And I guarantee you, I didn't look up to see if there was actually a hawk there, but I could see the shadow all the way along. And I'm running flat out trying to keep up with the bloody hawk shadow, because he said, you have to follow it. And just as we got there, about 1.5 k's away, it peeled off. And I was exhausted, man, because it wasn't a trot, it was a sprint. And covered in sweat. And I told everyone, right, we can go on site. And that was the beginning of our 2 days there. Towards the end of the second day, we got a sign which said we had to finish early, so we did. And then we spent some time at the end of that with the elders, who were telling us that the portal on this site, this is what I'm leading up to, is opened. It'll stay open forever. And as they said, he said, but it's for everyone. This is the important part of this. He said, there's white fellas, there's black fellas, there's blue ones, there's all different sorts of spirits coming through here. And you see, that's what this site's about. It belongs to everyone. I've been given ceremony by the Ramangeri. I was given ceremony by Kano, and I'm allowed to work under the auspices of what we call Wirichin, which is black fella, white fella dreaming. Everyone together. So this site that we're looking at is a site where ceremony should be done again, and will be. But everybody should be able to go onto that site and spend time on there. But I've got to make a point about this. With that particular site, and that's basically all we're talking about today, with that one site, I want to make a point. If you go on that site the wrong way, not been taken on properly, not escorted on, and without respect. Let me close with this. I want to tell you a story about a guy we met. Evan and I both met him. Evan knows his name and Evan knows where he lives. And he called us and we went and met him one day. And he was sitting with the same guy I sat with in the 1980s, way back, right? This is the place, the rocks were taken away in the 50s, but this was when the farm was younger, and he's talking more about it. And he told him everything I was told too, same thing. And this guy was quite reverential about the site, and he decided he'd spend the night and sleep on the male mound, right? And he did it with good respect, but did he do it properly? Did he smoke himself when he went on there? Did he give offering to the spirits? Did he do these things? No, he did not. He did it with good intention, but he didn't do it with protocol. And he told us what happened when he got up in the morning. And yeah, the ambulance did take him to the hospital, and they spent 3 days, and they couldn't work out why, and they took him home, and he was there for the next 3 months, and one side of his body was completely paralyzed. It wouldn't work. No one could explain why. And after 3 months, he woke up that morning, and the whole of his body worked properly, and he's never had a problem for the next 30 years when I spoke to him. But for 3 months, one side it was paralyzed, and it was the side that he laid on when he slept that night on the mound. Now, the spirits could have killed him. They were the same spirits who called the 8 hawks up that circled around Kano. But see, Kano knew protocol, you see, so the spirits worked with Kano. But this other gentleman had good intentions, but didn't know protocol. So they paralyzed half his body for 3 months. And he told us straight away, we didn't prompt him, he just said straight away, so I know what caused it. He said it was that mound. I shouldn't have done that. I know now. I knew straight away what had happened after a couple of days, because they couldn't work out why one half of my body could work. So the right hand and the right leg were working and the left arm weren't working. They couldn't work it out. There was no break anywhere. It was ridiculous, and it went on for 3 months. He said it was beyond there, and that's what's still there, and that's mound now today. It has those spirits inside there. And of course, what it wants is to be put back together. But there's problems with that. And that's still what we're up to today. There is a possibility that something might come out of it. And there's some people who've made contact with me that might be able to assist, but there's a lot of politics involved. And there's a lot of original politics involved. And that makes white politics look like a walk in the park, I've got to tell you. Oh, wow. You white fellas have no idea. When you came to this country, because as you know, I'm original too, and I'm white, I'm both, I'm Virgin. You brought 2 things that really didn't suit, well, 3 things that didn't suit with us. The food, the refined food's no good. Alcohol is crap for black fellas, and politics. Do you know which one was the worst one? It wasn't the alcohol, it wasn't the food. It's the politics. Man, divide and conquer. Our biggest enemy, black fellas' biggest enemy is not white fellas, not purple fellas. It's black fellas. It's vicious. So that's where we're up to at the moment. The site is, I believe, it is the story of the first people coming here, the first beings coming here. I think it's far more important than Stonehenge. Stonehenge marks out a certain time of the year when the sun comes up. This does so much more. It's still alive in every shape and form. And at the end of this year, when the original prophecies of the change comes through, that place will be absolutely powering. But in the meantime, it would be nice to put the rocks on there, and it would make it stronger than what it is, but it is strong anyway. So yeah, that will be a major part. And of course, the people listening to this, I've just given you a little bit of a rundown of what that site's about, but there are other stone arrangements too that we're going to talk about. But in the short term, these sites that are being found for a reason. And at the end of this year, all of these sites are going to come back into their own. And I think most people can sense that our world is changing. It'll never be the same anymore. And a lot of people are talking about the fact that I hear them say constantly the winds of change, but they're not sure what that actually means. Well, I'd like to close by saying this. The original people, the keepers of the old way, do know what that means. And I can tell you that I'm going to talk in a lot more detail about the prophecy of the 21st of December at 9 p.m. that takes place at Uluru for the men, at another site for the women, which I'm not going to talk about because it's women's business. And there is a belief with a lot of these keepers that when this ceremony takes place, that will be the beginning of the winds of the change that are supposed to be coming. And every person in this planet will be affected by that. So, and that's actually the primary motive behind the second online conference we're going to do. We would have done all these live. I mean, as you know, we had done the first one live and we've done it twice and they're both sold out. We've done the second one. We're going to continue doing it. We are going to do a conference soon that's just going to be all blackfellas. That's coming up soon. I'm leading up to that. Okay, we had Lionel do some healing and did stuff here. But what we're trying to do is put all the information into the prophecy, trying to give the information about what it means. And then the third one, it will probably be part 3. I'm working with original people. In fact, I've got to ring one today from Victoria. And he was the guy that actually first gave me this prophecy 3 years ago. He'll be part of it, of course, because he was the one who started this story. And we're going to be doing that at the finish there. But to do it properly, and the beauty of this is you can miss the first one and come in on the second one, and it's fine. You'll pick it up because the only part that's going to stay constant is the prophecy. I do that each time. And then all we're doing each time is different aspects of the same story. So it's thematic like that. And this time, Mary Robble's going to be talking about, we're doing a lot about what comes after the change. And Mary does a lot of work, as you probably know, with children who've been in contact with aliens of good intention. And these children have been in contact with them because they're part of the change. They will be the leaders in the change. So I think that's a very important concept. So we're trying to continually looking at this story different ways. But what I can say about that site is if you don't think it's magic, then what I suggest you do is go outside, start singing, and see if you can get 8 birds to circle above you in a figure 8. Make sure they're hawks. And if you can do that, what Kano did wasn't magic. And that site isn't magic. But if you try it and you find you can't do it, then ask yourself, how is it possible for a black fella that never went to uni, sings a song that no one there understands, but can make 8 birds sing above him or circle above him in a figure 8? How's that possible unless there's magic in the song and there's magic in the site? And just think, if that site and all of the other sites that have that potential were turned on, what if that'd make a difference on this planet? Because at the moment, all we've got is suits and ties, and they're all turned on, and they go to conference and they sit inside rooms, and they come out, and you know what? They don't do any magic. They do something else. They don't do magic anymore. So my point is, and I've said this to a lot of people, what if this doesn't happen? All the things we're talking about, that prophecy don't happen. I said, it still could anyway. If people wanted it to, it will happen. If people really want something like this to happen, the prophecy that we're talking about, and it didn't happen, we could do it anyway. It's a no-lose situation, this prophecy. If what the elders do and their songs don't work, and they don't turn on this thing that's been left behind, and it doesn't happen, if we all really wanted it, it would either way. And it happened both ways. But anyway, that's part of that in the future. So yeah, I'd invite people to come along and join the second part of this, knowing there's a third part that happens, and by that stage, we're going to get closer to that date. All I can say is, the reason why I'm investing in this is because I'm looking around at what the mob are doing at the moment, what our society's doing at the moment, and the way the leaders are dealing with this. And I'm thinking to myself, they're using this for bad reasons, and I see nothing good coming out of anything they're going to do past this point. So why invest in it anymore? Why not invest in all the old people from the indigenous groups, all the tribal people, whether they're Mayan, whether they're Hopi, whether they're Cherokee, whether they're original, whether they're Dungari, it don't matter. Why not invest in their ways now? Because the other ways, the ways that have got us in this mess, well, look what they've done. Look at the mess we're in so many different ways. The earth is polluted. And if this happens, it'll clean the earth up from within. And I've been told this many times too, if this doesn't happen, don't worry, don't fret, the earth will clean itself up and it'll get rid of the cause. And guess what? There's only one cause here, and it's not the birds, it's not the flora, it's not the fauna, it's just humans. It'll get rid of us, or we toe the line. That's what this is about. This ceremony that takes place, if it works, everyone gets judged. And if you can't toe the line, you leave. But anyway, we'll talk more about that when we talk about the actual ceremony. So that's thanks very much for letting us talk about that. I did most of the talking. I do apologize for that, but I'm prone to do that unless you stop me. But yeah, everyone, if you want to come along, we charge $20 because we do this differently. Everyone that comes to our presentation, we might arrange it and pull all the people in and do the radio shows, and the others don't do it, but everyone gets the same amount. We do this blackfella way. If you're there on the day and you're sitting in the circle and you make a contribution, it's equal to everyone else. So Evan has to arrange it all and chase this up, and we do most of the interviews with other groups, radio people like yourself, like your good self now. But when we do the day, everyone's got to do this equally, because we're doing a story and it's 4 or 5 parts, and if we take one part out, the story doesn't work anymore. So everyone's got to get the same amount. So we try and do something, whereas most of the people in Australia, when we do talks and presentations, it costs so much to put it on, no one gets paid. And that's because there's just no money left over. This is different. Everyone's in their lounge room. We don't have to pay for accommodation or flights or food. So we can do it this way. And that means the speakers get paid for once, which I've got to tell you, they all like this part of the equation. It all puts a smile on their face, because at the moment, until the change at the end of the year, money reigns supreme. We've got to give in a little bit. So thanks, mate. Thanks for asking us on. And I'll invite everyone on your group to join us and become part of that change. And if you can't join us, that's cool. Just remember, keep your ears and eyes open for the 21st of December. And try and get the admission ticket. But I've got to tell you, the admission ticket is quite tricky. I'm going to talk more about that on the talk, but it's not just saying, yeah, I'll put my hand up, I'll be there. It's not that easy, unfortunately. Then it gets not that hard.
Yeah.
Okay,
so please, everyone, go along to Stephen Evans' online conference. I'll put a link in the description and in the top comment to that.
Thank you.
Yeah, this was an absolutely incredible interview, and people are going to hear a lot more from you and Evan at the conference, and after that as well, in further interviews. And thank you so much for being on, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of the day. Is there any thoughts or words you want to leave us with about anything or what's coming up? Or
Yeah, there is one, Charles. Just in going, I'm about to put an article out. You do know about the fact that Juukan Gorge was blown up and exploded. We spoke about that before. It's only just come to my attention. The carry-on glyphs, the meditation table, one of the most sacred sites in this country. There is talk now of a 70 house subdivision running up to within hundreds of meters, not even a kilometre, within hundreds of meters of that site, and the place is unprotected. And that will mean you've got people wandering through all these sacred areas that's not protected. This is a big issue. I'm writing an article about it now. The subdivision has gone through, it's got all the ticks, and no one knew about it until a week ago.
Wow.
It snuck through. And the interesting part, let me share you this. I'll just close with this. Juukan Gorge was blown up by Whitefellow Company, Rio Tinto. I'm fighting for a site in Canberra. It's a Whitefellow developer that wants to put in a gated community of 300 houses, private tennis court, Whitefellow community. This particular presentation, it's going to be a subdivision. It's like a suburban subdivision. And lo and behold, as you would expect, we are fighting against our Blackfellow Land Council. I just want to make this point. This is not a racist thing. The destruction of sacred sites, people seem to think there's racist undertones in this. There are some there in some cases, but this subdivision, we're fighting against the Lands Council that have put this up, and they started putting this up in 2018. They've been doing it for a while. And people have now are protesting against it, and the Lands Council, according to the people who protest against it, or some of the people within, are calling them racist. And see how that term can be misused. So now what we're fighting for is it is not right to do this. I mean, if the place was protected full time, we could tolerate that. But if you've been there, you know, you walk there when you want. Has it been trashed? Yes. Have things been cut out? Yes. Has a matic been taken to one site and smashed? Yes. Have the glyphs been graffitied upon? One's been turned into a penis. Yes, that's happened too. Have things been taken away? My God, they've been taken on. Have things been scribbled on? Yes, that's happened too. And is anyone protecting it? No. So what's the solution? Let's put more people there, hundreds of more people there, and it still won't be protected. So please, ladies and gentlemen, I hate getting dragged into this stuff, but the elders asked me and I've got no choice. I've got to do it. I've written an article up, which will go up tomorrow, that sets out exactly what's going to go on. And we've said, if you're going to do this, you shouldn't. You shouldn't. Lands Council should not become developers. That's not what Gough Whitlam thought they were going to do. But if you're going to do this, then put up some guides, put up a ranger there, and put up a place where people can be escorted in and out and we can protect the site. There's a chance there that development could come out to be a good thing. But at the moment, putting hundreds and hundreds of people extra unsupervised on an area that's already been trashed, that should be considered one of the most greatest archaeological sites in the world, it's more of the same. It's Juukan Gorge again, it's Canberra again, it's Warragamba Dam again. It's happening all over the country. So please, ladies and gentlemen, it should be up tomorrow. If you see it, could you spread it? Because it looks like we're fighting for another site that's going to be trashed.
Damn.
You know what the logic is now? I worked this out. The cave. I can't blow up the cave, but I can put a bomb right next to the cave. I see that I can blow up to the line on the map. Everything around it I can blow up. And I don't care if there's interlinks between other sites and there's ley lines there. I can blow everything up, bar the bit on the map. And somehow they think that means it's okay. I know there's a resort taking place in Huskisson at the moment, and the elders there are complaining about the fact they didn't factor in the cultural landscape, and they're talking about sites 10 k's away. We're talking about sites that are a couple of 100 meters away, and it's the Lands Council we're fighting against. But down in Huskisson, the Lands Council is saying, you must consider the broader cultural landscape in your subdivision. I wish we had that Lands Council up where this is taking place, because I wouldn't be doing this. But it just goes to show you, ladies and gentlemen, here it is today, 2020, and original sacred sites are being trashed all over this country, and it's legal. Oh, I've got to change things, man. This society we've got, the whole thing's not working properly. It's just another reason why the 21st of December must happen. I mean, for God's sake, does that mean they could go and put a building on top of Uluru? Well, the answer is legally, and I know what the story is, any site in Australia that has a mining lease on it has a clause called exclusive rights. And at the moment, the exclusive rights are determined between the miner and the minister. The original people are not part of the party that determines the exclusive rights. And that's why Rio Tinto won't get fined. So, should there be a change? God, there has to be. And that's what our presentations are about. So yeah, that's another wrap for the presentation, but it's also a plea that this development doesn't get forward in its current proposal, because that site doesn't need 200, 300 people living there, plus their friends, plus their relations who come to visit. And who's to say, because nothing's protected, they stretch their legs and they go for a walk. They walk on top of things they shouldn't see. They pick up things they shouldn't do. And some people, I know this is true, and it doesn't matter what color they are, there are some people, if you pick 300 or 400 people, a couple won't be good people. That's life. And they'll go around with bad intent. And they'll be the same sort of people who scratch and matic and destroy. They'll come across from another angle, which means those sites will be damaged more. That's the only thing you're guaranteed from. And you know what? No one seems to care in all the areas. I do know that not one politician has fronted and demanded to go and look at Rio Tinto's damage there. Not one. They said, I need to go and have a look at it. No one's inspected it. So now we've got Carrion under threat now, again. And we thought we saved it before. Anyway, I'm going to go and relax and have a cup of tea. No, I don't do tea anyway. I will do something that makes me relax. Don't worry about that. We won't talk about that now. Okay, and you have a wonderful time, Charles, and it's really nice talking to you again. I appreciate where you're coming from and what you're doing. And what you do is vitally important in the change that's coming ahead, because if we don't have media outlets like you, we have editors doing Facebook and YouTube that won't let this stuff up. There's just nothing left. So you've got to keep doing what you're doing, man, because it's nearly all getting censored now. So please stay strong and keep doing what you're doing right until that day. Thanks, mate.
Thank you so much, Steve. Thanks for being on here. It's so distressing to hear about the sites. Everyone, please share, look at Steve's site tomorrow and share that article around, and even send it to the politicians, because I'm pretty distressed too. All these sacred sites are being destroyed before we can even examine them and learn about them.
No, well, we've lost Hugh and George. Okay, we don't know for sure. We don't even know if we can repair it, because they won't let us in to look at it. Do you realise that the original people who begged them to not blow it up still haven't been allowed to look at it to find out, can we fix it up? We don't know. So yeah, at least with Carrying, it's still safe at the moment. Surely we can step in this time. But anyway, yeah, thanks, mate. And yeah, please, by all means, your listeners and anyone involved in this, anything you can do to make people stop this happening. I mean, you just, and because the Lands Council put it through, politicians go, oh shit, I'm not touching this, man. They've ticked it. Well, that's the tick. That's the tick we're supposed to get. The funny thing is, they don't ask for that tick on any other development, do they? When the Lands Council says, we know you've played down the bombs, would you take them away? They say, piss off, you're not coming on. So they don't have any say that time. But when they say they've got the say, they get all of it. But it's only when they decide, oh yeah, this one, yeah, we'll give them the tick for this one, but that one, no, we put the dynamite down. We can't pick it up, man. It'd take a day's work. No, it's there. We've got to blow it up now. Anyway, yeah, thanks, mate. Thanks, Charles. Keep doing what you're doing. I hope to talk to you one time soon again when things start to get better, and they will. They will.
Yeah, we'll talk soon. And thank you so much for being on, and have a wonderful day.
Thanks, mate. Okay, mate. Catch you later. Bye.
Catch you later. Bye-bye.